So this is a video from, I think, a few years ago at least, with Tommy Robinson and the Imam of Peace, who is a more, of an advocate for peace and actually Islam reforming itself. Then they're discussing reform in Islam and if that is possible. So it's a very interesting interview between these two individuals. Let's check it out.
So right now, as an Imam, what are you fighting for? Reformation of Islam?
I say Reformation of Islam, but in reality I know very well there will never be a Reformation.
You know very well there'll never be a Reformation.
There will never be a Reformation of Islam.
I'm glad you said that.
But we will need to pave the way for a potential Reformation in a few centuries' time.
So when we hear that, from my point of view, because we have so many reformist Muslims in the UK, such as Majid Nawaz and Quilliam, who basically, this is a massive career for them, and they're selling a lie that we will reform Islam in the next generation. And it's like we've had 1400 years, it's not reformed. When someone's tried to reform it, we've had Wahhabists, Abdul Wahhab, who tried to reform Islam, and we brought it back to the core, what I'd say is violent teachings. But you don't see there is any opportunity or any chance to reform?
The idea of reforming something that was once upon a time introduced as perfect, it doesn't make sense. It's already perfect. So it's not like Islam was introduced in Mecca as another option or a theory or a new way of life. It was introduced as the perfect and the only way of life for all human beings. And when you come with such an approach, it's very hard to turn around and say, let's reform what is already perfect. What the Wahhabists did is that he sold a bigger lie, and he said, hey, let's live how the Prophet Muhammad lived, because that's the perfect image of man. So then he's more of a fundamentalist rather than a reformer in modern times. What I believe in when it comes to reform is that there will be a type of reform, but it's reformed individuals like myself. It will be a reformed Muslim community of third and fourth generation migrants, Muslim migrants to the UK, to Canada, to America, to Australia. People who no longer feel the attachment to what's happening in Syria and Iraq. For example, if most of these Middle Eastern families today have satellite dishes in their homes, whether they be legally or illegally, they have satellite dishes, and some of them require permits in certain countries such as Australia, some don't. When a father watches bombings happening in Syria, that emotional attachment of, yeah, let's send money to Syria, only exists within the father. It will no longer exist within the son and then the grandson. When you watch something in the news, you feel in debt to go and help out, interfering with what's happening over there.
See, the problem is, we see the opposite though. On the ground in the UK, the first generations that come were not extreme. The extreme, in fact, every generation we go through in the British Muslim community, they get worse and worse. Their views and their intolerance gets worse. And that's, by any Pew research or any research, it shows that actually, even for example, it's the youngsters now. The majority of terrorist attacks now are 17 to 24-year-olds. That's the majority of arrests, and now youngsters. And that we've seen that change over the last 20 years, from being elder Muslims to then going into the youngsters. So for us to think, I've said so many times, what we need is a worldwide revolution within the Islamic community to get rid of the hatred. But that's not what we see. So, you know, say I'm an Englishman, and should I sit here, or should our country sit here and gamble on the chance? What do you think the realistic opportunity is for there to be a revolution, or for there to be a mass uprising from Muslim youth who are going to throw away their detachment to this extremism?
It will never happen.
It will never happen. So as an Englishman, see, this is why I say we have to stop Islam. We don't have to stop extremist Islam. We don't have to stop radical Muslims. We have to stop Islam in the UK. And I say that in the sense that I'm a father of three. When I look at what previous forefathers done in this nation to protect and preserve a safe and prosperous Britain for the next generation of children, we're sitting by and hiding behind political correctness to sit here and watch as last year 2,000 British Muslims returned from fighting for ISIS. We're just sitting here like sitting ducks, and that's why. So I have to. What would you do if you was an Englishman, if you was a non-Muslim, sitting in a country that's ravaged by Islam, that's seen 3 brutal terrorist attacks in the last 12 months, 4, sorry, killing children, killing women, sitting eating dinner, stabbed in the neck. We've seen all of this. We've seen 12 prevented. What would you do?
I wouldn't blame you for any of the opinions you hold. And probably I would have the same stance and position towards such an ideology. However, we need to be very realistic. We could sit down and discuss and talk and share emotions and even propose certain things in parliaments and draft bills, but if we're not realistic, we're not going to be reaching a result. And this is how I am very different from many people that I sit with. We need to be realistic. Now, you want to stop Islam. Islam's never going to stop.
No, okay, I want to stop its influence in Britain.
You're never going to be able to. Let me tell you why. As much as I want to stop the radicals in Sydney, in Australia, it's very difficult, and this is why. Let's look at the Jewish community. The Jewish community, for tens of centuries, they've been persecuted, massacred and killed. They never had a government to protect them before Israel. They don't have Sharia law tables in the streets and in the city calling people to Judaism, dawah. In fact, when a Jewish man wants to marry a lady and she decides to convert into Judaism, it's a very hard process for her to become Jewish. And amongst all of these problems, Judaism still exists, and there are many Jewish people out there. It's not easy to take a religion and just hope for it to vanish or stop it. It doesn't work like that. Especially when you look at the statistics and how much they are growing and the children they are having. Most Muslim families, in fact, most Middle Eastern families, mostly the Muslim of them, amongst them, drive vans and big cars. Why? Because
6, 7 kids.
Exactly.
Is that a fluke? Is that a fluke? Or is that population jihad?
Look, my mother has 11 siblings. She's number 12, and one of them died from one mother and one father. When you're dealing with such a mentality that says, hey, lots of children is a beautiful thing in life.
Is that the reason? That's the point I'm making. Is that the reason, or is it literally population rise in order to conquer areas?
I will tell you this. Before the government of Saudi Arabia and before the influence of the Iranian Revolution, it was very normal, and it would be seen cultural, it's a national practice for certain countries to have families to have lots of children.
It was for the Irish as well.
But now, I do believe that there are actually political movements behind that.
Okay.
To actually fund families that have lots of children.
Yeah.
And we see that in Ahwaz, in Iran, between Iran and southern Iraq.
In order to change the demographics, region, yes. So they have control of that area.
And they're funded by the Saudis. Funded by the Saudis. Okay. Father, don't worry, we'll take care of your children.
We'll take care of everything.
Just make children.
Make children, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting interview on, again, reforming Islam and if that's even possible. So even, the Imam of Peace sees that this movement has snowballed to such a great extent that there's basically no stopping it. It's basically stuck in this form of the way it's practiced since it was, conceived by Muhammad. So it's very interesting to see that even he says this is not a force that can be changed from the inside. So just one thing I want to point out that, I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people are talking about moving, there's a lot of big radical community here where I live, and a lot of attacks against and anti-Semitism. I just want to say that it's never been an odds game for the Jewish people. We've always overcome the odds, thank God. It's not a numbers game we're outnumbered by 100 to 1. So, we've been outnumbered. We're only 0.1% of the population. It's never a numbers game. As he said, we've always survived no matter what, despite all the hardships. So I don't think it's a right answer for us to run away from any adversaries that come our way. And we should be, stand strong and, be who we are, and we'll overcome the odds no matter what. That's a promise for the Jewish people in the Torah, that we're always going to survive. And just an interesting point with the difference between Islam and Judaism is that, the Imam said, it's Judaism does not go out of its way to convert every single person that it can comes in contact with. That's actually very difficult, unless you do it the wrong way, and you buy a certificate online, anyone can do that. But if you think of it as getting a American green card or a gold card, as Trump says. You have to know what American values are, what their constitution is, and what their laws are about, and before you can convert. It's not like an easy process. So same thing with Judaism. Judaism, first of all, it shuns people away, but if someone's really serious, it's very rigorous to convert. And just actually to point out, one of the arguments that a lot of anti-Semites say is that, oh, Jews hate non-Jews. They hate the goyim. That's totally false. That's a very false narrative. And we don't want everyone to become like us. Judaism actually values the unique ways other nations have to serve God. Again, we want everyone to serve God, but again, in their own way. We don't want converts. And I think the biggest proof for this is actually in Isaiah. He says in 56:7, he says, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And that's regarding the third temple that's not even built yet. So again, it's not like we're hoping for this, world that's like Hitler-like, where only one almighty nation rules the world. We don't want that. We just want to serve God in Jerusalem, and all other nations are welcome. So I just thought that was an interesting point to point out. And just a last point, and that's they can't reform themselves. In Judaism, there's also been this sort of reform, not in the laws and not changing God's Torah, but just elevating our way of serving God. And just another difference between Judaism and Islam is that we don't want people to serve God out of compulsion and fear, as we see that Islam has been spread, unfortunately, through the sword, and a lot of violence, since its inception, where even Muhammad's family has been killed after that's how you have the split between Sunni and Shia. But Judaism sort of evolved in a sense that we don't want people to serve God out of that method of fear, but we want people to come to a knowledge of God and really want to perfect themselves and serve God out of love. So I think that's also a very interesting reformation that's happened a lot, especially with the Hasidic movement that's spread throughout Judaism and throughout all the world now. It's not changing the laws; it's elevating the way we look at God and our service to God, and just making that more joyful and more out of our own free will and our own demand to be closer to God. So again, just advice for the coming week is just make yourself more educated in our Torah. Try to bring our actions to make a real godly world, and your actions do count and do have an impact. If you find the news is getting you a little bit too scared and jittery for what's going to happen in the future, I think that's a sign that you need to take a break and actually just live your life and don't let these things bring you down. You're here with the Jewish Uncensored. Have an amazing week.